Hello, everyone. Aaron Nabus here, and welcome to episode 101. Can you believe it? Of the Hall H show. We are happy to have our previous guest from episode 79, which was recorded way back at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. The writer and creator of the comic book Duplicant, Karla Nappi. As a quick recap, I first met Karla at one of Ryland Grant's panels at WarnerCon a few years ago. And when we last talked, she and her family had moved from Santa Monica, California, to her hometown of Oradell, New Jersey. Growing up, she was a huge fan of shows like The X-Files and movies like Silence of the Lambs, which I'm sure had an influence on the darker side of Duplicant, a very entertaining comic book that also has shades of the movie Minority Report. Karla is currently doing a Kickstarter for issue number 4 of Duplicant, which ends on March 3rd, 2021. And I'm happy that she's back to talk about it. Welcome back to the show, Karla.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I can't believe it's been 2 years since the last time we talked.
It is. It's a little bit surreal, especially with all the current world events going on.
For sure. What has the pandemic been like for you professionally? I mean, we all miss comic conventions. For comic book creators like yourself, I'm sure it's been a huge loss in terms of networking and promoting your books. In the absence of comic conventions, what are some of the things that you've done to stay in the game, to stay sort of connected to your peers and fans?
Well, after we moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, I was in Oradell for just a temporary stay until the house that we bought in Pennsylvania was ready to be moved into. And being out here before the pandemic started, it was hard to get to any conventions because this is an area where there are no conventions. The closest one would be Philadelphia, and that's a good distance away. So the first Comic-Con I had been to since San Diego was Baltimore Comic-Con, when Ryland invited me to come out for a panel and to join him at the Ringo Awards. And it was like such an amazing experience to be back at a convention after such a long break between them, because I was used to California where there's conventions almost every other month there, and you can drive to most of them pretty easily. And then everything started to happen. I launched Duplicant in January, and we were sort of starting to hear rumors about the pandemic at that point, but nothing really scary yet. And I think once the Kickstarter closed, it was that rush of a month of, oh my God, we're in way over our heads with this. And that scary feeling of what are we facing as a world, and just kind of going in on ourselves. But I had just finished a Kickstarter and I had to keep going. I had to fulfill to my fans, and I had to keep producing products. So I was, doing issue 3, I was doing issue 4, and just trying to stay creative, which I think was one of the few things that helped me hang on to sanity in the overwhelming feeling of worry that came with just being in the pandemic and being a parent in the pandemic. So I would say the Kickstarter community has been really great for me as a replacement to conventions when it comes to meeting new creators. I've met a lot of new creators through Kickstarter with the cross promotions of different campaigns, and just kind of reaching out to people in more of a virtual way.
Yeah, you mentioned you're raising a kid during the pandemic. That must be tough as well as, trying to get your projects together.
Well, that was the thing. Right before all the shutdowns happened, we were just starting to look into, I had set up, my in-laws were watching Wyatt once a week. And then I had a friend down the street who was going to watch him a couple days a week. And then we were looking into daycares that some daycares also function as a preschool. And so we were looking into doing part-time daycare with him, so that I could kind of get more on top of my creative projects without having to constantly stick him in front of the TV or do it really late at night. My husband works until 8 o'clock. So having to try to do my work in the evening when I'm already exhausted. So we were trying to avoid that. And then also just trying to get some time for ourselves because we hadn't been able to spend any time together as just a couple. And then obviously that all flew out the window, and it's just been the three of us kind of locked in the house since the pandemic started, with, you know, outings to maybe like state parks, and sometimes we'll drive to New Jersey for the day to see my parents at like an outside park, so that we're trying to be as safe as possible, but otherwise we're basically home.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, Tell me about the crosswalk campaign that you recently spearheaded.
Oh, yeah. So that's actually still ongoing. So I present my case to the town council this coming Monday. It was supposed to be last Monday, but we had that mega snowstorm that came through here. I think we got like 2 feet of snow. So they canceled the meeting, and now it's going to be this coming Monday. Basically, where I live, there's a major road called Route 209, and that's the only way to cross. The crosswalk is basically the only place to cross to get into from Lehighton to Weisport. And there's no signs at all indicating that this is a crosswalk. There's only the single painted lines in the road, and people are going fast because they're still on basically a highway, and then they're going into like a bypass. So the road splits off from like a one-way, each side becomes like a one-way road where traffic can only go one way or the other. And it's just not safe. It's like most of the time you're either standing there for 20 minutes before you can even safely cross, or you have one car that stops and the person behind them doesn't want to stop or doesn't understand why that person stopped, and they try to go around them. And it's the only way to get to the closest playground to us. So I just thought, well, let me see if I can get some signage or something put in here. And when I talked to the town, they were like, well, that's an unbudgeted item and it's going to be costly. So you're going to need to have a lot of signatures, you know, and I'm not about to like go knocking on people's doors right now. So I was like, well, I guess I'll just do a petition. And the petition kind of took off. It was funny because I hadn't really reached out to a lot of media places except like the local newspaper. But then I had 2 news reporters. I guess they saw my posts on Facebook in the local groups about this, and they both did reports on it too. So I'm hoping the town will approve looking into it and at least, you know, trying to figure out a way to raise the money, because there are grant programs, and I think it's important to try to make safety a priority in the town, especially because this is an area where a lot of kids are, and a lot of, you know, you don't want kids crossing a busy road like that when it's not safe.
Yeah, I guess, well, are you going to start getting into politics?
Well, you know, what's funny is after I did this petition, so the petition's still open. It's not officially closed yet, but I don't know if Move On gets notified about petitions or what, but they texted me and they were like, do you want to run for local office? And I just kind of laughed because at this point, what my husband and I are trying to do is actually we're trying to get out of this area because it's a very conservative area. It's largely Trump-based supporters, which is evident from people who still have their signage and their flags and everything still up in their yards to this day. And also, you know, the local playground here has been defaced with swastikas a number of times that I've gotten removed. The town where the playground is has refused to do anything to find out who did it unless they know the exact day and time the incident happened, which who's going to know that information? And then the school system here, actually their mascot, which is like my next thing I'm going to tackle when I can figure out the time to do it, is the entire school system here, their mascot is a Native American, but they call it the Indian. And their hashtag is Tribe Pride, and their newspaper is called The Tribe. And it's just so like horribly offensive that it's kind of shocking that it's still a thing. Like when you walk up towards the high school, the road has these tomahawks that have been spray painted into the road to show you the way to the high school. Like this just isn't an area that I'm super keen on raising my kid in if we can help it. So that's my next thing to tackle, is trying to force the school to change their mascot. I'm still kind of getting my ducks in a row on that, because I think that's going to be a much bigger fight than the crosswalk is.
Good luck with that. I mean, it's kind of interesting that I guess the Chiefs are playing in the Super Bowl this weekend.
Yes, and they're getting called out for their racist, the way they are as well. So it's time. It's long past time for changes of this type of thing, and it's just kind of. Well, what was funny is I actually had heard a rumor that the school was changing the mascot anyway, so I did a right to know request of the school to find out whether it was actually being changed or not. And the only information they had was the student, back when the Washington football team had changed their name, had started a petition anonymously on change.org. And they, whoever it was, had sent it to the school. And that was it. Like, they didn't even bother to have a discussion about it or anything. Like, they just didn't even look into it or consider it at all.
What shows, movies, books, or comic books have been your comfort food for during this pandemic?
Well, right when the pandemic started, I was getting caught up on The Mandalorian, and I'm behind on season 2. So what my husband and I are trying to do is we're trying to have like a date night on like Fridays or Saturdays where we watch The Mandalorian. But since he hasn't seen season 1, we're watching season 1 again, which I'm totally fine with because I love the show. And then as far as books, I've had so many Kickstarter books. I'm like looking at my shelf with my books, like Elements Earth was a really good anthology that I loved. And Gothic Tales of, Haunted Futures, that Samantha Biko did. That was another Kickstarter book. White Ash is awesome. I love that book. Anything that Ryland does and Stephen Prince does, Monster Matador and Bandrax, Peacekeepers, The Jump. And I've gotten into this like funny, well, it's not really funny, but it's a detective series written by a British author called Jacqueline Winspear about her character Maisie Dobbs, and it's this female detective in Britain during the 1930s and 40s. That's kind of like my comfort food that I read too.
I like that name, Maisie. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like it too. It's a fun name.
Duplicant is a sci-fi thriller about a man who offers hope during a pandemic, and is a story that was influenced by, I guess, the AIDS epidemic and movies like Minority Report and Repo Genetic Opera. While it was created way before our current pandemic, can you describe how it feels to be working on a book about a pandemic during a pandemic?
It's definitely been surreal. And it's funny because, some people assume that I created this during our pandemic. And I was very heavily influenced by growing up during the AIDS epidemic. And, part of the reason why my characters are having such a hard time finding a vaccine was there still are diseases like AIDS doesn't have a vaccine. And, when I was a kid, chickenpox didn't have a vaccine. Like, those all took a really long time to find. So it never occurred to me that like a vaccine could be created so quickly the way it's been done recently. But it's also new technology that wasn't in existence before, when I was doing my research for this book. And so issue 3 was the first one that I've written during the pandemic, but the page-by-page breakdown of it was already completed years before the pandemic. So it was spooky when I was bringing those page-by-page breakdowns into Script Life to see how close I had predicted the future, especially as like the pandemic has gone on and we've learned more about how it works and it functions. And there's a lot of similarities to what I've written with my own pandemic. It's definitely been spooky.
Definitely. Without spoiling too much, would you mind doing a quick recap of issues 1 through 3 and then sort of giving a tease for issue 4? I guess especially for someone new to the Duplicant universe.
So issue 1 starts with our character Pamela, and she's a paralegal who's studying to get her law degree when she becomes sick with the organ failure pandemic. And she's hearing these rumors that there might be something wrong with these duplicant organs. So in this world, when you get sick, because there's no vaccine, when your organ fails, and in her case, it's her lungs, you get a duplicated organ. That's a perfect match for you. But the cost is so high, you're sold off to whoever wants to pick up the debt, and you become their indentured servant. And so she's faced with this whole new life, doing something that she never imagined she was going to be doing with her life. So there's that. And then on top of it, she's hearing all these rumors that the duplicant organs are compromised in some way. So she seeks out Matt Travers, who's the scientist that created the duplicant organs, to find out the truth about whether there is something nefarious going on with the organs. And to his knowledge, there's not, because he meant this to be a good thing for humanity, not the way it's been twisted to be used. And so his journey in the next 2 issues is to figure out whether something nefarious has been going on with his organs. And in the process, he uncovers some uncomfortable truths about what's been going on with the program. And he has to decide how far he's willing to go to get to the bottom of it and to make sure that humanity is basically safe.
Yeah, and I love the pacing of your books. I mean, I love how there's a cliffhanger at the end of each issue, and it just leaves you wanting more. And another thing that I love is you sort of have a consistent look for the covers. From a graphic design standpoint, I just love that branded look.
That is thanks to Layla, because when we went to do the issue 2 cover, I had all these wild ideas of what to do. And she's like, let me be honest with you. She said, from my experience, it's best if you have a consistent look with the covers because it makes you stand out. And she's like, and it helps readers remember your book on top of it. And I was like, she's right. And so we decided to just kind of go with having every issue be some character from the book with an organ that's having some critical mass issue.
Yeah, I love it. I guess why don't we go ahead and talk about your creative team?
Yeah, so I've been really super fortunate with my creative team. So first was Vince Hernandez. He came on board before I even had an artist. I just had a script. I kind of met him after a panel that he did at Long Beach, one of the Long Beach Comic Cons. And the fact that he even took the time to talk to me and then on top of it read just a comic script still kind of blows my mind to this day. It was amazingly generous of him. So he absolutely helped shape issue 1. And he hooked me up with Josh Reed, who did my logo and did the lettering on the first issue. And then Josh got hired at DC Comics, so he hooked me up with Carlos, who has continued to do the lettering since issue 2. And then Layla, I met through my friend Himkar Tak. He's a comic book writer. He did Boy One, I want to say for Dark Horse, and he has a new book coming out from Scout called Redshift. And he had used Layla for a cover on Boy One, and so that's how I got hooked up with Layla. Layla does the line work, and then Owen Gianni does the color work on the covers. And then my artist, Ryland Grant helped hook me up with my artist. She's based out of Poland, Mariana Strakowska, and she's been amazing. If it wasn't for her, the book wouldn't even exist. She just brings it to Technicolor, beautiful life, and makes a book that isn't very action heavy still feel tense and relevant and exciting.
Yeah, Ryland gets all these creators from all over the world. Are there any parts of the Kickstarter that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so I have Don Wynn, who's the creator of Pablo the Gorilla, and he did one of the Black Lives Matter's Punisher logos over the summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was huge news for.
It was huge, and he's unfortunately been dealing with a lot of unscrupulous people who've been trying to steal his logo and use it for themselves. And so he's become kind of an expert at getting that type of stuff removed from online. But he did a piece of fan art on my last campaign that went into a stretch goal And I asked him to do some original art pieces for this campaign. So he did 7 different art pieces of basically all my main characters.
Yeah, just a quick shout out to Don because he's such a huge supporter of all the independent comic book creators.
Absolutely. Huge supporter. Yeah, he's great. He's been awesome. And, I also have the variant cover, which is just the bare inks of Layla's cover as a tier. And then, I have the super ketchup tier, which is basically the 2 variant covers from issue 3 and issue 4, which are just the inks. And then the issue 1 and 2 perfect bound and the issue 3 and 4 regular colored covers. And then plus all the stretch goals from the last 2 campaigns, so all the postcards and the bookmark and all that stuff comes with it too.
Yeah, and if any of our listeners are interested, I mean, after hearing you talk about Duplicant for this podcast, I mean, I encourage our listeners to go check it out, especially now that you can sort of catch up on the past issues and some of the tiers.
Yeah, I'm excited about the tiers that we have. We had the actual original ink that Layla did for issue 3 up, and that got picked up in the first day, which was awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember talking to you in the past, and you had mentioned that I guess for Duplicant you have sort of the first 15 issues sort of mapped out.
Yeah, so the pre-pandemic, I had taken 2 classes at Meltdown Comics, and one of them was when I brought issue 1 to life, and then the next one was working on the series as a whole. And so I arced it out. I originally thought I was going to do 15 issues, and I have the page by page breakdowns done through issue 5, which I'm going to be scripting issue 5 this month. I just got the script to Carlos for issue 4 to letter. And I think I'm probably going to do 5 issues to wrap it out. But a lot of that is going to depend on money.
Of course.
Unfortunately, I wish that wasn't the case. But, well, we have to see how I do in sales through Diamond, because I'm in Previews World now. And then just, the Kickstarter community is the reason this book even exists right now. If it wasn't for the support of the fans helping fund the production of the book, I wouldn't be able to continue to make it financially.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to our listeners, the Kickstarter campaign for issue number 4 of Duplicant ends March 3rd, 2021. And if you're on the fence, here are a couple of testimonials from a couple of your fellow creatives. The first one is from David Pepos, the writer-creator of Spencer and Locke, Going to the Chapel, and the OZ. He says, quote, "A haunting sci-fi dystopia that cuts to the heart of modern medicine. A pulse-pounding mystery grafted onto gorgeously rendered art. Duplicant is exactly what the doctor ordered." And the next one is from Ryland Grant, the writer-creator of Aberrant, Banjax, and The Jump. The writer is sharp. The art is lights out. Karla and Mariana effortlessly transport the reader to a different time and different place. The only problem? You might not want to come back. I mean, if that doesn't encourage you to back this project, I don't know what will. Is there anything else you want to add to Duplicant and to the Kickstarter?
Well, I also have been very fortunate with Clay Adams. He's the creator of Deadskins, which is on Kickstarter right now too, and he is the reason my Kickstarter pages look so great, because he's the one that builds my pages for all of my campaigns.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
That's another testament to connections in the industry. I met Clay because Ryland had introduced me to David Schrader, who does Baby Badass, and David is friends with Clay.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I met Clay.
Well, I guess while we're on it, I mean, we have a round called Superhero Shoutouts. I mean, you mentioned Ryland and you mentioned Clay Adams. Is there anybody else you want to sort of give a shout out to?
Oh, definitely Clay, because he's got his own Kickstarter going right now. And then, there are a bunch of people who have campaigns right now. My friend Stephanie Oplinger, she's a artist, and I met her in a writing class for children's picture books, and she has a campaign right now for enamel pins, actually called Visions in Ink, and she's awesome. And then there's a book called Anira by Aaron Warbalski, and that's up on Kickstarter right now. And then Aaron Dowen, who does Beards and Comics podcast, he has a Kickstarter up called One Last Job. And then a Book of Lyaxia by Aaron Pohara. He's part of Second Sight Publishing, which is where I'm set up at, and he has a Kickstarter up as well.
Wow, all these errands.
There's a lot of errands. It's kind of like the Davids, you know. It's like David Pepose, Loney, David Schrader.
I know. I guess we'll take a little break and do a thunder round. Are you caught up on WandaVision?
I haven't watched it at all because honestly, I haven't seen any of the Avenger movies, and I don't know if I can watch it without having seen the movies.
Got it. Okay. I guess we'll skip that question then.
I would love to look at it though, because it looks like something completely up my alley. Like I'd be totally digging it.
I wonder how long it would take for you to get all caught up on everything.
I am so behind on like everything. It was funny because I've been talking to Dee, who does FTO Nerd Talk, and he was saying about how he's kind of behind on the Avenger movies too. And I was like, I haven't even seen any of the movies about the characters except for Guardians of the Galaxy and like one Captain America. And it's like, the only things I get to watch right now are like kids shows with my toddler.
Right. That's understandable. But there's just so much out there. Even though like I have more free time because of the pandemic, I'm still catching up on a lot of things.
Yeah, it's insane. I have a friend who she's just been kind of trying to get through a bunch of shows herself, and the list is endless, which is great. It's great that there's so much awesome content out there now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm even watching. I mentioned it in past podcasts that sometimes I'll just go down a YouTube rabbit hole, and I've discovered so many things. Like there's a skateboarder based out in Switzerland. I've been following his channel, and he tries to do all these insane skateboarding tricks, and it'll probably take him like 200 tries just to land one. But I get hooked on it, just trying to see if he can make it.
Yeah, we've definitely gone down the YouTube rabbit hole. It's funny because Wyatt tends to like the ones that are like cooking shows.
Oh, me too.
Has stuff where they make things different colors.
Yeah.
Like rainbow cakes.
Wow. What if Wyatt becomes a chef because of that?
Well, what's interesting is he loves to cook, so my husband will help him bake a lot of different things. And we've gotten into food coloring lately. So like we used food coloring yesterday to color white rice different colors, and like we're making like little volcanoes with vinegar and baking soda, and we put in the food dye so it's different colors, dyeing eggs. And he's very into doing any sort of science experiment or cooking thing with color.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm glad to hear that you're just letting him feel free to experiment.
Yeah, we did an online science class with him today, where they were just taking different colored tissue paper and using water to paint it onto a white piece of paper. And he decided to take, after the class, he's probably still playing with it downstairs right now, to take all the different colored tissue paper and try to build an Eva from WALL-E. He's just been like experimenting with creating an Eva with the water and the tissue paper.
How old is he?
He's 3. He's like super imaginative. It was funny because like it took me a while to like not feel as guilty about how much TV he's gotten, but it was like watching TV kind of opened up this world of play for him that I couldn't have imagined. Because it's definitely, unfortunately, it's cut down on the amount of time we read with him as much. He went from like we would read most of the day to he'll watch something and then he'll just want to play whatever he watched for the rest of the day. So like the first thing he saw was Snowy Day, the book that got adapted into like a little short movie for Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Pretend to be Peter all day for like months. He did this.
Wow.
He would wrap himself in like a red blanket and run around pretending to be Peter.
Does he have a favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. Okay. I guess once we get past this pandemic, what place do you want to visit first?
Disneyland. I want to go back to Disneyland. I miss Disneyland so much. It's like one of my favorite places in the world. And I want to bring Wyatt back there because I've taken him before. He's been to Disneyland and he's been to Disney World, but at this point he probably doesn't remember it because it was all pre-pandemic. I would just like to go and just have like a day of fun.
So do you have a preference between Disneyland and Disney World?
Yeah, and it's funny because when I tell people this, they're always like, really? I love Disneyland. I thought Disney World was overwhelming. I don't like how you have to kind of like wait to get into the park. Like there's like, it's like you have to take this boat to get there or something. I'm like, can't we just get the show, get the show on the road? And like, you know, and the fact that you have to like, there's all these different parks. It's almost too much, and getting to each park is difficult. It's not like at Disneyland where you can just walk over to California Adventure. You have to take some sort of transportation to travel between the parks. It probably sounds stupid, and if I didn't have a kid, I probably wouldn't care about these things as much. But when you have a small child and they have a short attention span and you have finite time to enjoy these things with them, the travel time can really kind of kill the day.
Oh yeah, I don't think that's stupid at all. I mean, it's definitely something that you need to be aware of.
But he loves the characters. He's ever since even when he was a baby, he would like would not care. I remember when we were at Disneyland, he was like 9 months old and he wasn't afraid of any of the characters. And usually at that age, the kids are screaming their heads off. And so I think the characters really loved it because they would keep coming back to him. To spend time with him because he would giggle and he just thought it was so funny that these big people in costumes were coming over to play with him. Chewbacca, he laughed. He just kept laughing at him. He thought Chewbacca was hysterical, and you know, I think most 9-month-olds probably would have screamed their heads off at Chewbacca.
Gosh, I don't even remember the last time I went to Disneyland. I think it might have been in high school.
Oh, that's a shame. I love Disneyland and California Adventure, both of them. It's great if you can do both parks in the same day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think, is Space Mountain even still around? I don't even know.
Mountain is definitely still around. That's my friend Stacy's, one of her favorite rides in the park. I get totally nauseous when I do that ride, so I don't do it.
Yeah, it's pretty disorienting.
It's very disorienting.
But I think I remember as a kid, I think one of my earliest memories of Disneyland was it Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah, that's a great ride.
Yeah. I've loved watching all the what do you call those things?
The characters that they have.
Yeah, along the side. Those are always fun to watch.
When you think about the amount of work that goes into it and everything else, it's pretty awe-inspiring.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, if you had the opportunity to go on a one-way trip either to the past or to the future, which one would you pick and why?
Oh, that's a good question.
And like, how far would you go in either direction?
Because it's definitely more complicated with having a kid.
Yeah, of course.
I think before I had a kid, I probably would have said the future, but now it's like I almost want to go back and kind of enjoy some of those moments with him when he was little. I would say I would probably go back to when we were still in California because I really miss living in California, and we're hoping to get back there sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I hope that happens soon too. Because I miss like talking to creators in person, and especially when this whole pandemic thing passes, it would be awesome to talk to you in person again.
Yeah, it would be great. And Wyatt's like starting to get old enough where he could, actually enjoy the conventions, and we don't have to kind of just keep him in the stroller and constantly keep throwing a movie in front of his face to keep him occupied.
When Duplicant gets adapted into a TV series or a movie, who do you envision playing some of your characters, and who would you want to direct it?
So Duplicant actually was originally conceived as a television pilot script before I adapted it into a comic book. I would love to see John Boyega be Matt Travers.
Oh, nice.
He would be freaking fantastic as Matt Travers. And Gillian Anderson is like one of my favorite actresses of all time. And I think she would be great as Francis. And then what is his name? He was in Lost. Hold on, let me look him up. Because I haven't seen him in anything in a while, and I don't know why. Saeed Jahar.
Oh yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what's going on with him lately, but I think he would be great as Sean. I think he'd be awesome playing my character Sean. And then I haven't really thought about the other characters for cast. As far as a director, I would love to see a female director behind the helm. I There's this director that I've been following since the foundation that I helped found a few years ago in honor of my friend Jessie Tompkins, who passed away. And she's amazing. Nikyatu Jusu, she's kind of blowing up, but she does more horror stuff. So I don't know that this would necessarily be in her wheelhouse per se, but I think she would do a stellar job directing something like this.
Well, at least maybe she can add to maybe add to some of the suspenseful maybe elements that are part of a movie or a TV series.
Yeah, I mean, right now she's focusing on doing all of her own material because she's also a writer.
Got
The
it.
program that I did was for people who did writing and directing of their own films. So, but I think she would probably be amazing at doing it if she would ever, if becomes a movie and she would be open to considering it.
The last time we talked, you mentioned Magicians as one of the shows that you would love to write for. Are there any other shows that pique your interest?
Yes, I would do anything to work on The Mandalorian.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I've literally watched it. Like, I have no time to watch anything, and I'm on the viewing with my husband. This is his first time watching it. As I said before, it's my third time watching the first season. I love it so much.
What are some of your standout moments from the show?
I I love all the moments when we kind of see Mando's vulnerability, and when they kind of twist on his head, like that moment when he's had this thing where he hates the droids through the whole thing, and you understand why he hates the droids, but then he starts to have this attachment to, and I cannot believe I'm blanking on the name of the droid at the end, that he has this attachment to him after this droid has seen his face, and it's the first time his face has been seen since he was a child.
There's been a lot of talk online about, because you know how like throughout the first season, it was a big thing that he didn't take off his helmet, but now that he's taken off his helmet a few times, I mean, how do you feel about that? Is that something that's
Well, I haven't seen the second season yet, but I am aware that he's taken off his helmet. I think it just is a necessity as time goes on with this character. I'm not surprised that they opted to do that. There's been rumors that the actor wanted to be seen more. I don't know how substantive those rumors are, but I think just creatively, you eventually are going to need to see their face at least once a season, if not more.
Mm-hmm. I guess my last question for the Thunder Round is, it's like noon, almost noon my time, and it's definitely you're 3 hours ahead. So I don't know if you've eaten yet, but describe your perfect pizza.
Oh, my perfect pizza. Okay, so there's this place in Pennsylvania near Hershey that we really like, and they do an upside down pizza. So it's the cheese on top of the bread, and then the sauce on top.
Oh,
And then you can add toppings on top of it. And so we usually get mushrooms, and that's like a really amazing pizza. And we only get it once a year because we try to go to Hershey around Christmas time.
wow. Do you remember the name of the place?
You know what? Let me look them up too real quick. It's funny. I should remember the name of the place because it's actually where we had our rehearsal dinner. Finici's.
And is mushrooms like your preferred topping?
Yeah, a mushroom, or I actually always like a good meatball on my pizza too. But it has to be like a good meatball, not like a greasy meatball.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I love meatballs too. I'm a sucker for a good meatloaf too, as well.
Meatloaf and mashed potatoes. I've been making a lot of mashed potatoes.
Oh, yum! You have to share your recipe with me. The last time we talked, you gave some good advice on making comic books, particularly the importance of having a finished product having a good group of people to run ideas through, and paying your creative team up front. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
I would say just keep making connections too. It's, you always want to make sure you're having other people read your work and that you're always, being aware of your team. You want to make sure that you're being respectful of your team. Like, don't just throw work at them without checking in with them ahead of time to make sure what their schedules are like and what's going on. Be respectful of your team. Make sure you're always including them in any discussions about your book. Because, like, my book wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the people who are helping me bring it to life. And then, yeah, just keep building those connections. Don't be shy about sharing your knowledge with other people, because you don't want to make it harder for people to be able to make it in this industry. It's hard enough as it is. So why not share the information you have?
Yeah, speaking of being shy, I know in our last episode together, you had touched on how you were really shy growing up. Um, can you remind our audience again on how you got past that?
I took a class in high school on public speaking, and that was a big help. I feel like I rely on the lessons I learned in that class throughout any time I do any sort of speaking in public. And I'm still shy. I definitely get like nervous, like sweaty hands if I'm talking to someone I don't know. I end up like nervously like doing something with my hands. So like when I'm on panels in conventions, I'm always glad I can keep my hands like under the table hidden so I can kind of like nervously do something to keep myself occupied. It's just about, a lot of it's just about trying to stay in the moment and not kind of go down the road of thinking about why I'm nervous and what I'm nervous about, and just trying to stay present.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm still shy. It's like, it's so much easier to try to like meet people online now, because it's not like you're having to do it in person.
Yeah. Plus, I think, at least from my perspective, it's having that initial sort of first meeting online, like through social media, makes it easier for me to talk to them when I go to a convention in person, because you sort of establish that relationship beforehand.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right.
A lot of the creatives that have found success are the ones that seem to have set themselves up to play the long game. What are some things that you've done to put yourself in the best position for long-term success?
I've just been trying to do as many things as I can. So when Clay and David came to me to ask if I wanted to be part of the Nightmare Theater anthology they were doing, I said yes, even though I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to afford to pay an artist to bring the story to life. And I just figured out a way to, get that money together to pay the artist I hired, Anemone, and Carlos, who did the lettering for me, so I could bring that to life. And then when I was at Comic-Con the last time at the portfolio review, there's a portfolio review for writers by Friction, and they do a quarterly anthology of short stories, and I think it's usually just one comic story in it. And so I kept in touch with them, and I'm working on a story with them that I think is going to be put out later this year. And then, I had another friend who asked me to write a short story. So it's like, if people see that you're putting out a lot of work and you're being active, it feels like they're more likely to come to you to do stuff, because they feel like you're a reliable creator of content.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Why do you love what you do, and what drives you to write and create?
So writing is one of the things where I can kind of get out of my own head. And when I do write, I just kind of feel this sense of peace and contentment, unless, of course, I'm having some sort of creative block, which definitely happens, because I suffer from anxiety and depression. So sometimes it's really hard for me to just be able to even sit down to write. And I'll get, this sense of like anxiety of, oh my God, I have like no time to get this done and I have to get it done. But once I can kind of like get into a place where it's quiet and I can just sit and relax and focus on what I'm doing, it's like the time just flies by. And the next thing I know, like 2 or 3 hours have passed while I've been writing. So I just try to remind myself of that good feeling whenever I have anxiety about just getting myself to sit down to work on my projects. And then I I think part of my creative stuff too is like when Ryland and Jeff Leeds invited me into their group, it was a surprise to me because I had never been invited into a group with like such great creators before, and it was humbling too. And I just felt like I needed to honor their faith in me as a creator. And especially, you see how much stuff Ryland puts out. He's such a prolific creator. It kind of keeps me on my toes to just keep trying to keep pace with him. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
almost like a way to keep us honest. Like he's, sending us stuff to read constantly. And so, Jeff and Steve Princeton, Ryland and I, we all show each other everything that we do. And so that's just another great way to like keep the creative process going, is knowing you have this group that's kind of, helping you move forward.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm sort of reminded to when I was back in graphic design school. I mean, even though we were, all young, relatively new designers, um, the people in my class, we kept in touch for a little bit, and we would sort of, share and projects and see what other people thought. And I remember the amount of growth during that time period was like amazing to me.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Because after I had Wyatt, I had to basically stop everything just to be able to focus on caring for him. And so it's only been since we moved into this house in Pennsylvania that I tried to get things going more, because we thought we were going to have more help when we moved here than we did. So the help we thought we were going to have just kind of didn't prove to be as reliable as we had expected. And then
Hmm.
the pandemic just complicated everything in terms of getting any help. So it's I started the Kickstarter last year anticipating that I was going to be able to get more time to myself to focus on this stuff where I didn't have to split my attention with Wyatt so much. And I think as a lot of working parents have been struggling during the pandemic, it's like you still have to do your job all day. And it's obviously not the same for me. I can wait until my husband's done with work, but it's like just trying to make that balance of keeping your kid occupied without necessarily throwing them in front of the TV all day while taking care of your responsibilities when normally, your kid would be in school or daycare or whatever the situation would be, and you could just have that devoted time to focus on your work.
I don't want to keep you from Wyatt for too much longer, so we'll start closing out the show. Is there anything that we missed? Are there any other projects that you'd like to promote? How is Petal the Timid Inventor doing?
Yeah, so Mariah Terry is still working on the art for that. She's been very busy, so the art is going a little bit slower than we both had hoped. But that's she's got to prioritize her day job, and she's actually creating some trading cards for me for Duplicant as a stretch goal for the campaign. I just got the
Nice.
first look at them yesterday, and they look really awesome. I showed them to Ryland and Steve, and they both thought they were great. And then I'm also creating an animated show set in the Philippines with animator and creator Sapphire Sandalo. And we wrote the pitch last year during the pandemic. We brought it out to a bunch of places, and they wanted to see the script because we don't have a writing sample together of an actual script that we've done together, because this is our first project together. So we've been working on that since January, writing the actual pilot script for that. And so I'm excited about that, because I think it's going to be a great project, and it's something we haven't seen in animation before, a show set in the Philippines that deals with the supernatural and it has a strong female protagonist in it.
Um, where is the best place for our audience to connect and follow you?
So I'm on Instagram and Twitter under Musings by Crazed, MusingsByCrazed. My website is karlanappi.com, KarlaNappi. And then Facebook is where Duplicant lives. It's facebook.com/duplicantcomic.
Awesome. Well, Karla, I just want to say thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's so great to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. It's always good to have a chat with you.
And thank you for listening to the Hall H Show podcast. We love putting the spotlight on independent pop culture creators like Karla. If you have a suggestion for a potential guest, please let us know. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, YouTube, Spotify, and of course our website, hallh.com. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent creators, we would appreciate a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on iTunes, or actually Apple Podcasts. And please spread the word on social media using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and stay safe out there.